The coffee had gone cold again. Dr. James Miller rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the computer screen, where countless rows of genetic data scrolled past. 3 months of studying genetic samples from mountain climbers who survived extreme conditions had led to nothing but dead ends and cold coffee. He reached for his cup, accidentally knocking over a stack of papers. As he bent to pick them up, something on his screen caught his eye. A pattern in the genetic code, something he had never seen before. His hands began to shake as he pulled up other genetic samples from his database. There it was, the same sequence, hidden deep within the junk DNA of every sample. It wasn't random noise. It was too perfect, too structured. Like a message written in the language of life itself. "This can't be right," he whispered to himself. The sequence appeared artificial, almost like someone had inserted it into human DNA thousands of years ago. But that was impossible, wasn't it? He picked up his phone and called the only person he trusted with this kind of discovery. "Anna, you need to see this. Now." Dr. Anna Thompson arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing her pajamas under her lab coat. She had been his research partner for 5 years, and he had never seen her move so fast through the analysis. "James, this isn't natural. This sequence, it's like a locked program. See these markers? They're like switches, waiting to be turned on." Her voice trembled with excitement. But the complexity, we're decades away from this kind of genetic engineering. Maybe centuries. They worked through the night, running test after test. By morning, their lab station looked like a war zone of empty coffee cups and crumpled papers covered in hasty notes. "We need to test it," James said finally. "We need to see if we can activate it." "On what? We can't just start experimenting on people," Anna protested. But James was already pulling up the records of their stored tissue samples. They had hundreds of samples from their previous studies, all properly donated for research purposes. The first tests failed. So did the second, third, and 20th. But on the 21st attempt, something happened. The tissue sample began to change, its cells rebuilding themselves in ways that defied everything they knew about biology. "My God," Anna whispered, staring through the microscope. "The cells, they're not just regenerating. They're becoming better, stronger." A loud bang made them both jump. 3 men in dark suits stood in the doorway of their lab. Behind them, James could see more men in tactical gear securing the building. "Dr. Miller, Dr. Thompson," the lead man said, his voice flat. "I'm Agent Wilson with the National Security Agency. You need to come with us. Now." "How did you?" James started, but Agent Wilson cut him off. "4 hours ago, your discovery triggered several national security protocols. What you found, it's bigger than you know." As they were led out of the lab, James noticed something strange. The agents weren't just watching them. They were watching the skies. They were driven to a secure facility beneath the city. The elevator went down for what felt like forever. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a high-tech command center. Dozens of screens covered the walls, many showing what looked like astronomical data. General Hayes, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, was waiting for them. "Doctors, thank you for coming. Though I suppose you didn't have much choice." He gestured to the largest screen, which showed a satellite image of Mars. 12 minutes after your discovery, we detected an energy spike from this location on Mars, a location that, until today, appeared to be nothing but empty desert. The image zoomed in, showing what looked like a massive structure emerging from the red soil. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general continued, "you haven't just discovered a mysterious genetic sequence. You've discovered proof that humanity isn't entirely human. And our creators have noticed that we finally found their message." James looked at Anna, then back at the screen. The structure on Mars was now clearly visible, a massive complex of alien architecture, hidden for who knows how long, waiting for humanity to unlock the secret in their own DNA. The coffee in the command center, James noticed absently, was just as cold as the cup he'd left behind in his lab. But somehow, he didn't think he'd need caffeine to stay awake anymore. The world changed on a Tuesday afternoon, not with a bang or a war, but with a press conference. Millions watched their screens as the United Nations Secretary-General introduced humanity to their first alien visitors. James and Anna sat in the secure facilities conference room, watching the broadcast alongside General Hayes and various military officials. The alien who called himself the Arkan Ambassador stood tall and graceful at the podium, his silvery skin reflecting the camera flashes. "We have watched and waited," the ambassador said, his voice surprisingly human-like. "For 10,000 years, we have guarded the experiment that is humanity. Yesterday, 2 of your scientists discovered what we had hidden within you." James felt all eyes in the room turn to him and Anna. His throat went dry. "Your species carries within it the greatest weapon ever created," the ambassador continued. "A gift from our ancestors, who saw in your primitive forms the potential for greatness. But now we face a crisis that requires this weapon to be awakened." The room erupted in whispers. General Hayes leaned forward, his face grim. On the screen, reporters shouted questions, but the ambassador raised a hand for silence. "We are not here to harm you. We are here because we need you. Our civilization faces extinction, and the power hidden in your DNA may be our only hope." After the broadcast, the secure facility became a whirlwind of activity. Military leaders from around the world arrived for emergency meetings. Scientists were flown in from every major research institution, and in the middle of it all, James and Anna worked frantically to understand the genetic sequence they had discovered. The Arkans provided some information, but James noticed they always seemed to hold something back. They'd brought strange equipment to analyze human DNA, but never fully explained how it worked. "Something's not right," Anna whispered to James late one night as they reviewed test results. "Look at these readings. The sequence isn't just an enhancement program. It's way more complex than they're telling us." Before James could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridors as security teams rushed past their lab. "Breach in Sector 7. A voice announced over the speakers. All personnel evacuate immediately." James grabbed their most important data drives while Anna quickly backed up their latest findings. They could hear shouting and what sounded like fighting in the distance. General Hayes burst into their lab. "We need to move now. The Arkans are trying to take test subjects by force." They ran through the chaos of the facility. Scientists and soldiers rushed in all directions. Through a window, James saw an Arkan ship hovering over the building, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "They're not just taking random people," the general explained as they rushed down an emergency stairwell. "They're targeting individuals whose DNA shows signs of being compatible with activation. They've been scanning everyone in secret." They reached a secure bunker deep underground. On the monitors, they watched as Arkan soldiers tried to round up specific personnel. But something unexpected was happening. Some of the humans were fighting back. Really fighting back. "Oh my God," Anna gasped, pointing at one screen. A young security guard, cornered by 2 Arkan soldiers, was glowing with a faint blue light. As they watched, he threw one alien across the room with impossible strength. "It's starting," James said, understanding dawning on him. "The danger, the need to protect, it's triggering the sequence. The program is activating on its own." More reports began flooding in from around the facility. Similar incidents were happening everywhere the Arkans tried to take people by force. The genetic program wasn't waiting for controlled activation. It was responding to the threat. General Hayes smiled for the first time since this all began. "They wanted supersoldiers. Well, looks like they're getting them, just not under their control." On the screens, more and more humans began to show signs of activation. The Arkans were retreating, clearly surprised by the development. Their careful plans were unraveling. "We need to understand what's really happening," James said, turning to Anna. The Archons didn't tell us everything. But maybe now we can find out what humanity was really designed to become. Above them, the sound of fighting continued, but it was changing. Humanity was waking up, and the Archons were about to learn that some experiments take on a life of their own. 3 days after the Archon attack, James and Anna worked in their new hidden laboratory, deep within an old military bunker in the mountains. The walls were covered with genetic data printouts and blurry photos of activated humans performing impossible feats. "Look at this again," Anna said, pointing to a complex DNA model rotating on her screen. "The activation sequence isn't just adding new abilities. It's remembering something." James moved closer to study the display. They had been analyzing blood samples from newly activated humans, and the results made less and less sense. Or maybe they were finally starting to make perfect sense. "These markers," he said slowly, "they're not experimental additions to human DNA. They're more like locks. Locks on abilities we already had." A soldier rushed into the lab. "Doctors, we found something." The team raiding the Archon facility discovered their historical database. The data painted a very different picture from what the Archons had told them. Humanity's ancestors weren't primitive beings uplifted by alien science. They were warriors, heroes of an ancient galactic civilization. "We chose to lock away our power," James read from the translated files, his voice shaking. "The Great War is over, but the price of victory was too high. Until we learn to master ourselves, we will seal away our strength. Let our children grow up learning wisdom before power." Anna's fingers flew across her keyboard, cross-referencing the new information with their genetic studies. "James, that's why the sequence is so complex. It's not just an enhancement program. It's a complete archive of who we used to be." Alarms suddenly blared through the facility. On the security monitors, they watched as 3 Archon ships descended from the clouds. But these weren't like the diplomatic vessels they'd seen before. These were warships. The Archon ambassador's voice boomed through all channels. "You leave us no choice. The power within humanity was meant to serve us against our enemies. If you will not comply willingly, we will take what we need by force." General Hayes burst into the lab. "Our satellites have detected more Archon ships entering the solar system. But something's strange. They're running from something." James pulled up the alien historical files again, searching frantically. His face went pale. "They lied about everything. They're not the descendants of our benefactors. They're the reason we locked away our powers in the first place." The truth clicked into place like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. The Archons had been humanity's ancient enemies. After their defeat, they had spent millennia searching for a way to harness the power that had almost destroyed them. "The genetic locks," Anna gasped. "They're not just about stopping us from accessing power. They're about making sure we only unlock it when we're ready, when we've evolved enough wisdom to use it right." The bunker shook as the first Archon weapons struck the mountain. But something unexpected was happening in the valley below. The attacks weren't causing panic. They were triggering more activations. On the security feeds, they watched civilian volunteers helping evacuate nearby towns. As the danger grew, more of them began to activate. But it wasn't random. Each person's abilities seemed to emerge based on what was needed most at that moment. "That's why they couldn't control it," James said, understanding flooding his face. "The program doesn't just give people power, it reads their hearts. It's not about making weapons. It's about bringing out the heroes we have inside us." A young soldier ran into the lab, his skin glowing with the now familiar signs of activation. "Doctors, you need to see this. All around the world, people are changing. But not like before. They're working together. Like they know what to do." The ground shook again, but James was smiling now. "Of course they know. It's in our DNA. Not just the power, but the memory of who we were. Who we can be again." Anna grabbed her tablet, downloading everything they'd learned. "We need to get this information out to everyone. The Archons aren't here to save us or help us. They're here because they're afraid of what happens when humanity finally remembers who we really are. Outside, the sky filled with Arkan ships. But below them, humanity was awakening, not to become the weapons their enemies had hoped for, but to become the heroes they were always meant to be. The world transformed in waves. As news of the Arkan attack spread, more people began to change. It started with small things: a mother lifting a fallen beam to save her child, a firefighter walking through flames unharmed, a doctor whose touch could now heal. James watched the reports flood in from the bunker's command center. Each screen showed a different city, a different awakening. In New York, subway workers phased through solid rock to rescue trapped passengers. In Tokyo, students developed the ability to process information at incredible speeds, helping coordinate evacuation efforts. "It's not random," Anna said, studying the data on her tablet. "Look at the pattern. Each person's abilities match what they truly want to do, what they need to protect." A young activated soldier named Tom came running in. His skin still glowed with the blue light of recent activation. "The Arkans are pulling back. But something's wrong. They're laughing." General Hayes brought up the Global Defense Network display. Arkan ships were retreating from cities worldwide, forming a high orbit around Earth. Their weapons were powered down. Why aren't they attacking? James wondered aloud. Then he saw it, a pattern in their formation. They're not retreating. They're watching, like scientists observing an experiment. The bunker's main screen crackled to life. The Arkan ambassador's face appeared, but his usual diplomatic smile was gone. Fascinating, isn't it? How fear spreads the activation. We couldn't have planned it better ourselves. Anna stepped forward, her voice steady. "You wanted this. The attack was just to trigger mass activation." Of course, the ambassador's smile returned, cruel and cold. "We needed to understand how the program works. Your responses have been most informative. But now comes the true test." The screen split, showing a massive object moving past Mars. It was bigger than any Arkan ship they'd seen, shaped like a giant arrow pointed at Earth. "The Void Swarm isn't a lie," the ambassador continued. "They're very real. And now they're coming. You have 3 months until they arrive. Let's see what humanity does with its rediscovered power when faced with true extinction." The screen went dark. The command center erupted in activity, but James barely noticed. His mind was racing, connecting dots he should have seen before. "Anna," he called out, "remember the tissue samples? How they kept improving?" She nodded, already moving to her computer. They pulled up the latest data from activated humans worldwide. The changes weren't stopping. With each generation of activation, the abilities were growing stronger, more refined. "The program," James said, excitement breaking through his fear. "It's not just awakening abilities. It's learning, evolving. Each activation teaches it more about what humanity needs." They worked through the night, analyzing patterns in the worldwide activations. People weren't just gaining random powers. They were developing abilities that complemented each other, forming natural teams and support networks. A teenager in Brazil who could now see the future worked with a truck driver in Canada who could teleport supplies to where they would be needed. A farmer in Kenya whose crops grew overnight coordinated with a teacher in Ireland who could instantly share knowledge with others. "This is what the Arkans don't understand," Anna said, watching the networks of cooperation grow. "They see these abilities as weapons, but look at how people are using them. Everyone's first instinct is to help." Tom returned with more field reports. Activated humans were organizing, sharing information about their abilities, finding ways to work together. The Arkan attack had meant to frighten humanity into submission. Instead, it had taught them how strong they could be together. "We need to broadcast everything we've learned," James decided. Every activated person seems to instinctively understand their own abilities, but they need to know the bigger picture. They need to know we're not just fighting for survival, we're remembering who we are. General Hayes nodded. I'll contact every government, every news network. But what do we tell them about the Void Swarm? James looked at the latest activation data, at the endless variations of abilities emerging, at the ways humans were already adapting and improving their powers. Tell them the truth, he said. We have 3 months to remember how to be heroes. And this time, we're not locking away our power when we're done. Above them, the Arkan ships maintained their watch, waiting to see what their experiment would do next. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that power meant destruction. They were about to learn what power looked like when it was driven by hope instead of fear. The first images of the Void Swarm arrived on a quiet morning, transmitted from deep space telescopes. The command center fell silent as everyone stared at the screens. The swarm looked like a dark cloud at first, but closer images revealed millions of biomechanical ships moving as one massive organism. They're not just coming to Earth, the Arkan ambassador explained, his usual smugness replaced by genuine fear. They consume everything. Planets, stars, even the space between them. They've already devoured 12 solar systems. James studied the data streaming in. Something about the swarm's movement patterns seemed familiar. Anna noticed it too, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she compared it to their genetic research. James, she whispered, look at their ship design. The way they move. It's like they're following a program. Just like the activation sequence in our DNA, James finished. The Void Swarm isn't natural. Someone created them, just like someone created the program inside us. The ambassador shifted uncomfortably. They were weapons, like you were meant to be, created by the same ancient civilization. But the swarm broke free, turned on their makers. That's why we need your power, to finish what our ancestors started. General Hayes stepped forward. You mean what our ancestors started? You've been lying from the beginning. The civilization that made us made the swarm. They weren't your ancestors. They were ours. The truth hit James like a thunderbolt. The activation program wasn't just about awakening powers. It was about passing on knowledge. Each time someone activated, they received fragments of ancient memories. Put together, they told a story. Humanity had once ruled the stars. They had created the Void Swarm as the ultimate weapon. But something went wrong. The swarm developed its own intelligence, its own purpose. Rather than destroy their creation, humanity chose to seal away their powers and hide on Earth, leaving behind guardians to watch for the swarm's return. The Arkans weren't our guardians, Anna announced, reading through more decoded memories. They were scavengers, trying to steal the weapon program from our DNA. But they couldn't understand it because they didn't have the one thing that makes it work: human creativity. Around the world, the awakened humans were proving her right. Unlike the rigid, programmed powers the Arkans had tried to develop, human abilities were evolving in unexpected ways. Each person's power had its own unique signature, adapted to their personality and needs. Tom burst into the command center. You need to see this. The training fields. Something incredible is happening. They rushed outside to where hundreds of activated humans trained together. But they weren't just practicing combat. They were innovating, combining their powers in ways no one had imagined. A woman who could control gravity worked with a man who could manipulate energy, creating contained fusion reactions. A teenager who could talk to machines helped others understand and improve their powers at a biological level. Each discovery led to new possibilities. This is what the Arkans could never replicate, James said, watching the display of human ingenuity. The program in our DNA isn't just about power, it's about creativity, about finding new solutions. An alert sounded from the command center. The Void Swarm had accelerated. They would reach Earth in less than 2 months. They sensed the awakening, the ambassador said. They remember their original purpose, to seek and destroy power like yours. You've made yourself their primary target. But James was smiling. No, we've given ourselves a chance. The swarm follows its programming, moves in predictable patterns, but we're doing what humans do best: adapting, innovating, finding new ways to use our powers. Anna pulled up the latest global data. Activated humans worldwide were sharing their discoveries, teaching each other, combining abilities in new ways. The power wasn't just growing stronger, it was growing smarter. The ancient humans didn't lock away their powers because they were afraid, she realized. They did it because they knew that when the swarm returned, humanity would need to rediscover their strength in their own way. Not as programmed weapons, but as creative, conscious beings. The Arkan ambassador watched the training field with a mixture of fear and awe. Humanity wasn't becoming the weapon they had hoped to control. They were becoming something far more powerful. They were becoming themselves. 1 month before the Void Swarm's arrival, Earth had become unrecognizable. Cities had transformed into training grounds. Awakened humans filled the skies, testing their powers and preparing for the coming battle. But it was in the quiet moments that the most important changes happened. James stood in his lab, watching a group of children play in the corridor below. They had all activated recently, but they weren't practicing combat. Instead, they were inventing games with their powers, finding new ways to combine abilities just for fun. "That's the key," Anna said, joining him at the window. "Look how naturally they adapt. The Arkans spent thousands of years trying to unlock our power, but they never understood that it's not about the abilities themselves. It's about how we use them." Their research had revealed something extraordinary. Each generation of activated humans wasn't just getting stronger. They were evolving in response to each other. Powers complemented one another, filled gaps, created synergies no one had predicted. Tom rushed into the lab, excitement clear on his face. "The defense networks are ready, but you won't believe what people have done with them." On the main screen, they watched as humanity's preparations unfolded. Traditional military bases had been transformed into something entirely new. Activated engineers had created technologies that worked in harmony with their powers. Healers had developed new ways to boost and stabilize abilities. Students and scientists worked together, combining modern knowledge with awakened ancient memories. "It's beautiful," James said, studying the data. "Every activated person adds something unique to the whole. The program isn't just making us stronger, it's helping us grow in the direction we choose." An alert flashed on their screens. The Void Swarm had changed course, accelerating faster than expected. They would arrive in 3 weeks, not 4. The Arkan ambassador appeared on their communication channel, his silver face tight with concern. "This is unprecedented. The swarm always follows predictable patterns. Always. But now, they're adapting, changing their strategy. Like they sense something different about Earth's defenses." "Of course they are," Anna replied, understanding dawning on her face. "They were created by the same civilization that created our program. They recognize us. They're evolving too." James pulled up the latest scanner data. The swarm's ships were reconfiguring themselves, developing new formations, showing signs of actual strategy instead of just programmed responses. But something else was happening too. As news of the swarm's acceleration spread, more humans began to activate. This time, though, the powers that emerged were different, more subtle, more focused on connection and understanding than raw strength. "Look at this," Anna said, pointing to her screen. A group of newly activated humans had developed the ability to sense and communicate with artificial intelligence. Others could visualize complex systems, see the flow of energy and information. "The program isn't just giving us power to fight," James realized. "It's giving us the ability to understand our enemy, to see them not just as a swarm, but as beings capable of change, just like us." General Hayes called an emergency meeting. On the command center's main screen, they watched recordings from the outer solar system. The front edge of the Void Swarm was visible now, a dark wave approaching Neptune. "We've got every weapon imaginable," the general said. "Powers beyond anything we dreamed possible. But the swarm keeps adapting. Every simulation we run shows them countering our attacks. But James was smiling. That's because we're fighting them wrong. We're thinking like the Archons, treating our powers like weapons. But look at what happens naturally when we let humans be human. He pointed to the children in the courtyard, still playing with their abilities. They don't see powers as weapons. They see possibilities, connections, new ways to solve problems. Anna caught his excitement. The ancient humans didn't lock away their powers because they failed. They did it because they knew that when the time came to face the swarm again, we would need to approach it in a completely new way. Not as warriors, but as innovators. The general looked skeptical. You're saying we should experiment? Now, with the enemy weeks away? No, James replied. I'm saying we should do what humans do best. Create. Adapt. Think differently. The swarm is evolving to fight warriors. But that's not what we are anymore. We're something they've never faced before. Humans who remember who they are, but aren't bound by who they were. Above them, the stars began to dim as the edge of the swarm drew closer. But for the first time since this began, James felt real hope. Humanity wasn't just ready to fight. They were ready to show the universe something entirely new. The Void Swarm arrived on a clear morning, their ships blotting out the sun like a storm of dark metal locusts. Humanity waited, but not in fear. Every activated person felt the ancient memories stirring in their DNA. This wasn't the first time Earth had faced this enemy, but this time would be different. James stood in the Global Command Center, surrounded by screens showing defense physicians worldwide. The Archons watched from their ships in high orbit, waiting to see how their experiment would end. They're starting their attack pattern, Tom reported, his enhanced senses tracking the swarm's movements, just like in the simulations. But humanity wasn't following any simulation. As the first wave of swarm ships entered the atmosphere, they met something unprecedented. Instead of military formations, they faced a dancing web of powers working in harmony. Children who could speak to machines reached out to the swarm's ships, not to destroy them, but to understand them. Energy wielders didn't attack. They created shields that turned the swarm's weapons into fuel for Earth's defenders. Gravity controllers redirected attacks into carefully constructed zones where time manipulators could study the swarm's technology. Look at the pattern, Anna said excitedly, pointing to her readings. The swarm, they're hesitating. This isn't what they expected. They're trying to adapt, but they can't predict what we'll do next. James finished, because we're not fighting. We're creating. All around the world, humanity's response evolved moment by moment. When the swarm launched biological weapons, healers transformed the attacks into beneficial mutations. When they tried to hack Earth's computers, tech empaths turned their code into new forms of communication. The Archon ambassador's voice crackled over the command channel, filled with disbelief. This is impossible. You're not destroying them. You're not even really fighting them. What are you doing? We're being human, James replied simply. This is what the program was really designed for, not to make us perfect warriors, but to let us be perfectly ourselves. Hour after hour, the battle unfolded unlike anything in human or Archon history. Every swarm adaptation was met with dozens of creative solutions. When they launched planet-killer weapons, Earth's defenders turned the energy into gardens in the sky. When they tried to corrupt the atmosphere, weather controllers transformed the poison into aurora lights that strengthened their powers. But the true change came from the youngest activated humans. The children who had spent weeks playing with their abilities saw something in the swarm that the adults had missed. They're not just weapons, a young girl told James, her eyes glowing with power as she watched the battle. They're lost. Like we were before we remembered. They need to remember too. Understanding swept through the activated humans like a wave. The swarm wasn't just their ancient weapon, it was part of them. A creation that had lost its way, just as humanity had locked away their own truth. James looked at Anna, saw the same realization in her eyes. The program in our DNA wasn't just about power, it was about wisdom, about learning when not to fight. Across the Earth, Activated humans began to reach out not with weapons or shields, but with the very thing that made them unique: the power to connect, to create, to change. The swarm's attack faltered. Their ships began to move differently, no longer as a mindless mass, but as individuals awakening from a long dream. The program within human DNA called out to its forgotten children, offering not destruction but transformation. High above, the Arkan ships watched in silence as humanity did what no weapon could do. They reminded the swarm of its own forgotten purpose: not to destroy, but to protect; not to consume, but to create. "I understand now," the Arkan ambassador said softly. "We sought weapons, but you became something far more powerful. You became whole." As the sun set on the first day of Earth's new age, the swarm no longer darkened the sky as an enemy. Their ships transformed, becoming part of a new network of life and creation, spreading out from Earth to the stars. Humanity had not just survived. They had remembered the most important part of their ancient legacy: the power to change the story. James looked at the children playing with their newly transformed swarm friends, their powers combining to create wonders never seen before. "We didn't just wake up our past," he said to Anna. "We woke up our future." Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever, waiting for humanity to bring their gift of transformation to the rest of the galaxy. Not as conquerors or weapons, but as creators, innovators, and most importantly, as humans who had finally remembered who they truly were.